Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome to Tag Tuesday. Today I'm doing the Efftup Book Tag. I was tagged by Marc Nash. The original tag was created by a channel that's new to me. It's called Guilty Feet. I have heard that channel name mentioned on kind of the younger or maybe the hipper sections of BookTube recently. So I'll leave links to Mark's version of this down below and to the original. And I want to do this tag, even though Mark tagged me about a week ago, I want to make sure I did this tag and did it justice, because this is one of those tags that I really think asks some interesting questions and asks us to look at our books differently and can be interpreted in all kinds of different ways. So obviously if we're saying a book is effed up, the initial reaction might be that it's effed up and we don't like it. I want to make clear that there are books on my list today that I consider to be effed up that I do actually like. So effed up may just mean that the subject matter is effed up, or that it's kind of like trippy effed up, or it could just mean also they don't like it. I'll try to make that clear. And at the end I'm going to tag a whole bunch of booktubers because I want to see what they, kind of want to see their reactions and what they think of as being effed up books as well, because I just think this is a kind of an interesting takeoff for discussion. So a really good tag, and I'm looking forward to getting to it. I have the answers on my phone here along with the prompt. So prompt number one, a book that was effed up in a good way. So my book that's effed up in a good way is Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. I don't think there's any doubt this book is effed up. It is an intensely violent. Its descriptions of violence are graphic. Its depictions of all the horrible things human beings can do to one another are incredibly graphic, and no one really is spared. But I think that it's also kind of a brilliant book and effed up, in a good way, because it shows us, I think, what's attempting to show us is, contrast between good and evil, between good and neutral, between all the kind of things that humanity encompasses are on display here, even if evil wins out more often than not. That the contrast between the character of the judge and the kid, and I think the judge is one of the great characters in modern American fiction, the contrast and the contest between those two figures in the book is emblematic of kind of, I think, the contest between the forces perhaps of civilization and hope and against the forces of evil and despair. I just think it's really good. And on top of that, I think it gives you a pretty good idea of exactly how violent the settler culture was as it moved west across the United States. Anyway, so that would be my effed up in a good way book. Prompt 2 is effed up, a book that's effed up in a bad way. Okay, there were a lot of books I was going to choose, but in thinking back on this, one of the most effed up things I've ever read wasn't a book, but it was actually a story by a sci-fi fantasy writer who was kind of a big deal, I think, in the 70s and 80s. His name was Philip Jose Farmer. He wrote a series of books called the Riverworld books, in which essentially, I think when you died, you went to this planet called Riverworld, and it mixed together people from all across history and place and time together. Anyway, I read the Riverworld book series when I was a big fantasy reader, and I remember liking them a lot, and I went out and I bought a book of short stories called Riverworld and Other Stories, I believe. And the other stories in that were quite shocking, and so the thing that I'm mentioning is effed up in a bad way is one of those short stories, and I believe that short story was called Tom Miller's Dawn Patrol. Anyway, let me just say that it is raunchy, and it's there's excrement, and there's ageism and nursing homes, and it is truly effed up, and I would encourage you never to read it. But an opportunity to mention an author who I don't think I've ever seen on BookTube, Philip Jose Farmer. I couldn't pass that up, even if it is mentioning in a negative way. Book 3, a book that everyone loved but you think is just effed up. I'm going to go with Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind's depiction of life in the South and slavery is effed up. Whether it's the book or the movie, Margaret Mitchell intended to romanticize the ideas about the Old South. And there's a lot of kind of coded racism involved in the book, and of course the movie And Scarlett O'Hara is an effed up heroine. You know, other than determination and willpower, the exact kind of horrible person that nobody should want to be. Prompt 4 is Sexy Effed Up, and I went with the book I talked about last year for maybe Midrash, and that is The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. This is my old, I think, Weinstein copy. Yes, an old Weinstein copy, the paperback I bought back in the 80s. And, you know, this book is not, you know, without issues. It's not, you know, but it is, I think, sexy in an effed up way, if for no other reason than the character of Sabina is incredibly sexy, I think, in the book, and there is actually a lot of sex in the book, so that's the one I went with so that I could have something for this category that wasn't Vox by Nicholas and Baker, which is my kind of go-to for dirty books that I mention whenever that topic comes up in a tag. Prompt number 5 is effed up for kids. What kid story is not effed up? I mean, Cinderella is pretty effed up. I mean, the stepsisters actually cut part of their feet off to get them in the glass slipper. But, you know, when my kids were going through, like, middle school and junior high, there's a lot of messed up kind of or effed up middle school books. Like, my son and I laugh about Tangerine all the time, this story about a kid whose older brother, who is the favorite of the family, essentially blinds him by spraying spray paint onto his eyes. There's Someone Was Watching, where a boy's sister is kidnapped by somebody in a van. Or maybe that's the name of it. Anyway, there are a lot of effed up books for kids, so that was a pretty easy one for me. Prompt 6 is an effed up classic. You know what I'm going to go for. Wuthering Heights. This thing is effed up. The characters are terrible. They're terrible, horrible people. There's not really any of them that are particularly good or noble. And I know at the end we're supposed to think that the next generation there's more hope for them, but I just don't feel that way. This is one of the effed up books on my list I don't like, and Wuthering Heights is to me an effed up classic. Prompt number 7, effed up in translation. I'm going to go with The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. This is translated from the Swedish. This is an incredibly popular crime series introducing Lisbeth. Oh, geez, what's her name? I just forgot her name. Oh, yeah, Elizabeth Salander. I don't know why I have a hard time remembering that. Elizabeth Salander, and while I thought the detective part of the story was great, and I really enjoyed this book, it's about some effed up stuff. You know, Elizabeth does some effed up stuff to her parole officer. The crimes involved a lot of really effed up stuff, so this is my effed up book in translation. Again, that doesn't mean I didn't like it, it just means that in some way the subject was effed up. Effed up nonfiction is prompt number 8, and I went with Eye Deep in Hell, Trench Warfare in World War I by John Ellis. Back during the time when I was really obsessed and reading a lot of World War I stuff, history, this book gave me a deep dive into the gruesome awfulness, complete with pictures of trench warfare and exactly kind of the hellish nightmare situation in which men fought, survived, lived, were broken. It's pretty, talks about some pretty effed up stuff in there, so that's my effed up nonfiction. I was tempted, really tempted, to talk about Lisa Tadeo's Three Women, which is effed up, which I read for the BookTube Prize last year, but it's effed up in a way in which it's horrible, but I've talked about that book several times. Hey, look, I got one more shot in it, Lisa Tadeo's Three Women being effed up. Prompt 9 is Illustrated Effed Up. This was hard for me. I don't read a lot of graphic novels, so I just went kind of back to my childhood and the old Tales from the Crypt cartoons. There was a time in my life where I was really fearful of movies and books, and images really disturbed me. And I had nightmares a lot until I was around, I don't know, 11 or 12 years old. I was afraid of the dark, slept with the light on. And I, you know, this is no great feat of strength or anything, but I got tired of being that way and not being able to go see movies or always being afraid. you know, that there'd be something on TV that would scare me when I was around my friends, or I'd be embarrassed. And so I just started kind of embracing kind of horror for just a short period of time in my life. I got a lot of horror comic books, which scared the bejesus out of me quite frequently and were really effed up. I started watching horror movies whenever I could, kind of making myself sit through them until essentially I just became numb to the whole horror movie thing. That is one of those, I think being able to watch horror movies and those kind of things is one of those things where you can get out of the practice of. I really have a hard time with kind of grisly, murderous, grotesque, violent horror movies still today. I prefer creepy myself. And let's see, prompt number 10, a book that's just misery porn solely designed to convince you how effed up the world is, beginning and ending with Cormac McCarthy and The Road. I realize at the end of The Road there is some sign of hope, but this is just a book about misery. A book about awfulness and misery and horrible things happening, and there's a child involved. And, you know, while I don't hate The Road like some people do, I don't love it, and in part I think it's because it attempts to do in a way what Blood Meridian does, but just goes too far with the misery and the awfulness, and also I don't think the writing's quite as good. So that would be my 10th book, or that would be my, what is it? A book that is just misery porn solely designed to convince you how effed up the world is. That would be The Road. So there we go. Those are my 10 answers to the prompts. I'm going to tag a lot of people. I'm going to tag Steve Donoghue because he's recently acquired some deodorant, so it's okay for the rest of us all to hang around with him. Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse, I'm tagging you because I think, I don't mean this meanly at all because I love you, but I think you're more likely to use the F word in any of your videos than anybody else I watch. Kathy Grimm, because, well, Kathy, you always say people don't tag you, and I'd really be interested in your version, your answer to a lot of these. Lucifer over the Argyle Dinosaur. Obviously, wait, actually, you're the person who uses the F word more than Jason, even though I watch, so there you go, I'm tagging you for that. Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, because I'd be interested to see what your perspective on what makes a book effed up and not. Dane from Dane Reads, to get kind of an English perspective and a much younger person's perspective on what is and is not effed up. Kazen from Always Doing. Kazen is an incredibly great booktuber, and she is very opinionated, and she has lots of ideas about what makes something effed up, and so I'd like to see her answers. Noah from Everyone Who Reads Must Converse, because Noah reads a lot of modernist books, and there's a lot of effed up stuff in there. Courtney Ferriter, because I just enjoy her scathing opinions sometimes, and her point of view on things, like her discussion of the use of the Holocaust and Sylvia Plath's Ariel. That's what made me think of her for this. Then Kim from Middle of the Book March, again, someone with opinions they like to share. And then Roz from Scallydandlling About The Books, because, you know, well, why not tag Roz? She's awesome, and I'd like to see her answers. Anyway, there you go. There's my version of the, what was it called? The Efftup book tag. Yeah. Love to hear your comments in the comment section down below, and as always, thank you for watching.